Major League of the Day. While I'm waiting for it to get a little bit filled up before we start with our message for the day. I'm trying to learn some stuff. Learn some things. Alright. Got that set up like this. We're going to go like this over here. Hit this little refresh button. Divine Rise, Grand Rise, Great Rising. Remember, just like we do at this time, today is the only day that matters. You are the only one that matters. Because we see from this point of our day where we are at, everything's meant to be experienced. Everything is something to experience and or observe. And just because you're observing it doesn't mean you have to have a direct experience. That means you have to go through it in order to gain understanding. And everything that's experienced, just because someone hasn't experienced it doesn't mean they can't observe it. That comes into our mindset of that lackluster mentality. The lackluster mentality, as I'm getting some stuff out and sharing this through some other stuff, making this pop off. The lackluster mentality. The lackluster mentality is the frequency of the imprint. Throughout the week, we're going to be getting deep into impression and the imprint. We're going to be getting deep into this week. Throughout our week, as I'm sitting here sharing this into some groups. On this week's episode of the God Hour Podcast, Great Rising. On this episode of the God Hour Podcast, we got into copy and paste. This week in the God Hour Podcast, it's all in the description. It's in the description. Spotify, Anchor, and Grand Rising. We are getting into the understanding the impacts versus the impact versus the imprint. In spaces with ourselves, even when we've done our healing work, we're doing our shadow work, we're working on ourselves. We don't take into the accountability of looking at the imprints of our days. It's one of the major factors that I've had to learn in myself, just in learning myself and doing my practice and studying and starting to read energy more, my stuff coming online more for myself, all of these aspects in that space. But one of the things for us is the lackluster mentality. That lackluster mentality is the imprint of the trauma or the imprint of those events. In the podcast, I got deep into the aspects of that imprint of the imprint causes the emotional impulse because you have to fill that space. While when you're creating, I gave a simple analogy. I gave two simple analogies. One analogy that I used was you get the job, you get the house, you get the family, you get the dog, you get the car, you get all of these things in your life. They come to your life. What impact are you going to be using in order to fulfill that space? What impact are you going to be using? The original impact or the trauma or the events, the childhood traumas in these events create imprints in the impressionable of the childlike mind. Remember, we're going from the childlike mind to the innocence of our childlike heart. So one of the things that I think about all the time is, for me, especially in me designing my day. Designing my day, that's one of the main keys, me designing the day, is how am I going to make my impact in the day? What is my impact for the day? This goes into the aspects of the vision board, creating your sigils, creating that work, because everything that you're doing in this point for yourself in the beginning of your day is creating your day. And before we're going to build on this, but I wanted to use the cards to illustrate the tools, because I also want to do an example of that. Everything down here is a training apparatus and a tool. Once you master the tool, you become the tool. So anything from as simple as, I'm going to pull a card off of my human design deck. I'm going to pull from the Oracle deck, pull from my Oracle deck, and I'm going to pull from my Reflective Tarot deck. So we're going to do 3 aspects of a pull. And these are going to build, this is going to give us a building of the aspect of the day, especially in this topic of lackluster mentality. So you would think about something in your work for yourself, of a question that you ask yourself. A lot of us, when we ask the question to ourselves, it's the old imprint or the emotional imprint for us not to be fully engaged into learning from it. This comes one of the major keys is understanding to be fully engaged into yourself. You're coming into yourself. You're coming into me, I see, the intimacy of your power. You're stepping away from the control or the emotional impulse based on what you knew. You're stepping away from the impulse or the control, the emotional impulse or the control based on what you knew. Because once you think it, it's already known, it's already gone, it's already happened. So we're stepping into the aspect of our now. We're coming into the aspect of, let me make my impact. How would this impact my day? Something as similar as I've said before. Are you loving too hard? There's no such thing as loving too hard. It's simply you are undisciplined in your loving. You are very independent because you are within independence. Last night I dropped a little video because I thought I was editing the podcast, and I put into impression, or I am the embodiment of the press of my imprint, what imprinted me in my mind. A lot of us get stuck within that realm of impression, trying to keep ourselves, since I came into a certain space a certain way, based on the trauma, based on the events that I've been through, I'm stuck within that imprint and seeing things only based in that imprint. I'm stuck in that space. That's mainly what we got into during the podcast this week. But I'm gonna pull the first card off the top. Pull the card straight off the top from my deck. This one is Gate 31, or the Influence. If you're interested in a human design analysis, hit me up in my inbox. We can set that up. We can set that up when we do a whole reading. Gate 31 would be influence. This is how you build your day. Influence, the law of friction, whether active or passive, the integers, transference, and thus the influence, the natural expression of leadership. Line 6 on this would be application. Line, just because you're building up to your coming to your higher self. So you have to discuss about your application process. How are you applying things into your life? Are you applying things in your life based on a self-righteousness model? That means you are self-servient based on the fundamentals of whatever was imprinted into your life. Because a lot of us, we think about the aspects of religion, being the binder, the binding agent. That's simply another reflective aspect to keep you stuck within fundamentals, because religion means to bind to fundamentals. So that's the imprint of the fundamentals. So if religion is still triggering somewhere deep inside that you have to deal with, you really gonna have to deal with it, is your fundamentals within yourself. This is how you use everything around you. If you're being triggered by, you're still putting up posts and triggered about religion in certain ways and aspects, somewhere within you, you are still bound to certain fundamentals that leave you in a self-righteous or a piety state. That means this: you can't see anything, you don't take in any information, you can't hear anything because it doesn't fit the fundamental or the old imprint. This is going to take you into the aspects of your intent. When you're stepping forward and growing into yourself, what is the intent of the application that you're coming into? What is the intent of the application that you're coming into? My intent, I say it every day. I say it to myself when I first wake up. I say it every single day while I'm at the gym. I say it every single day. Whenever you see lives or see anything that I post, I desire you to be great. My intention is the desire for me primarily to be my best self, my authentic self. So in natural reflection, everybody around me with my intent, not based on the aspect of the old imprint, my impact in every space that I go into. This is when you start understanding your energy. My impact in every space that I go to is to cause something to change. Something will change based on my impact in every space, my value in my space. Something's going to change. Something's going to be there'll be an imprint there. And from that point in your mind, based on your intent, staying in your space, staying in your truth to yourself, you're able to be open and vulnerable to the things that are going to come into you into that space. I get very deep into the topic of when something comes up, it's supposed to come up. The negatives that are coming up, the negatives, the problems, the issues, the things that are coming up that are triggering you, they're only going to come up if they're ready. It's time to look at the influence. Think about that aspect of the influence. One of the mantras for that is like, I lead. To take yourself out of the old imprint, say, I lead. And then as you're saying that you lead, the things that are going to trigger or challenge you based on you saying that you lead yourself are the things that will keep you in a state of following. The things that will keep you in a state of leading yourself will be the things that you are steady in the imprint of following. The things that will also pop up in that same space, remember, from ideas to the thought to the person to the place, are the places that you go to in a mindset of following, because you're becoming a leader. So then after I pull the card of influence, I go ahead and pull me nice three little cards from my oracle deck. I pulled 3 cards from the oracle deck. The first one is moderation. Show y'all the cards. I remember being in school and the teacher would read a book, taking us back to that childhood place. The second card is reaction. The third card is clarity. So now that I've pulled these 3 cards, under influence, the gate 31 of under influence. Now, this is how you start. Once you understand, this is one of the major keys when it comes into reading cards and taking your cards in. Anybody can read cards, get the definition, and say this card means this and that, that, and that. When you're getting into defining your energy, defining the energy within yourself, defining yourself, the intimacy of the power of you. When you're coming into that space, this is when you start using things like this to help you navigate through your space. This is how you use these things to navigate through your space, because this is you trusting the process. You pulled these cards. This is you trusting that process. So now I look at influence. Now I look at influence, application, self-righteousness, intent, selectively, arrogance, and manifestation. So now I can look at my mind. Now I'm looking at what do I need? Which one of these words triggered me the most? Which one of these words triggered me in the aspects of my influence? A lot of us come into that space when you're in that self-righteousness to yourself of you want to be perfect, not understanding that perfect that simply means balance. You realize that you take yourself out of that space in moderation. I now can look at myself in moderation and take everything in and allow it to set up. I allow my day, I allow myself control or the power in my day, the influence of my day. Now I'm sitting there like in moderation. What do I need to start taking in moderation? What you need to take in moderation, it will show up to you. That sense of overwhelm, when you start thinking about that, just programming this word into your mind, into that old imprint, it now has to fill that space. So now you fill in that space. That you now need to take moderation and actually sitting there with that thought. This will bring you into the aspects of checking your reactions. I've said this before. It's a lot. It's very big. The emotional impulse is the reaction. The emotional impulse is based on the foundation of your intellect, what you know, what you knew, what your mind thought. So when we think about what your mind thought, remember everything, as soon as you think it, it's already a thing of the past. So the past is connected to the aspect of the memories. Based on your emotional impulses, it would be, oh shit, this is what I go to based on my emotional impulse. You're learning how to curve yourself from the reaction. You're learning how to indulge in your genius. Genius is wanting to know, simply wanting to know and simply wanting to do. Stepping into your genius, stepping into your indulging in your genius is simply wanting to do and wanting to know. That is stepping into your genius. I step into my genius every day that I rise. Anything that comes up that can challenge my genius, that can make me want to have an emotional impulse, 9 times out of 10, I'm laughing more. Ever since, like, this is even before I did my release ritual, I'm laughing more. Things come into my space that at an older point in time, I would take it as an aspect that it would challenge me or make me feel some type of way, or I would be like, oh my God, I can't do this anymore. But now I'm in a space to when something comes to me based on my genius, based on my knowing of myself, the truth within myself, I can direct myself to gain my clarity. Yeah, like I keep moving it because like I keep doing my thing. Yeah, you know I'm weird like that. But when you're inside of your space, when you're inside of your space, this is how you gain clarity. In your aspect of how you react to things on the emotional impulse, your emotional impulses are going to give you a lack of clarity. It's always going to mess up your clarity. It's always going to trick whatever it's triggering. Pay attention to that reaction. Pay attention to that trigger. Pay attention to what's being reacted into that. That's very big in that. And that's how you're going to gain your clarity. The clarity is always outside of your comfort zone. Your clarity is always outside of your comfort zone. Your clarity will never be inside that place of comfort, ever. I had to learn that just in the aspects of myself, just in deep aspects of shadow work the first couple times that I died. I had to understand, you have to understand that your clarity will not come from inside of your comfort zone. That old imprint. So when we think about the imprint, think about the imprint of oppression, think about the imprint of struggle, think about the imprint of being pro or this or anti this or whatever it is. Think about that imprint. You have to live within that imprint. So you'll never really make an impact. This is what happens with a lot of people when we get stuck in debating and arguing and going back and forth in this information. Having these arguments is no point to argue because all you're doing is feeding through an emotional impulse. And all you're actually doing is finding somebody to agree with you to even have the argument with you. When you arguing with somebody, if somebody returns back to you with the argument, y'all completing that circuit, all you're doing is arguing. So all you're doing is completing the circuit. Both of y'all are in agreement. The emotional wave is what y'all on in that agreement. So y'all never get clarity. You never learn anything. And the things that you do learn, they can't be taken in because it doesn't fit your old imprint. So then we build these 5 cards. We build these 4 cards. Through the moderation of understanding my reactions is going to bring me clarity. That's going to change my aspects of my influence and bring it to my. And then you just build back up. You build your pyramid. And then the last cards I use in my building of my day to illustrate my day to myself. I'll sit my cards in front of me and I'll sit there and I'll meditate with them. I'll look at them. I'll allow myself to feel the card, feel the energy of the space. Allow myself to become open. And whatever's coming up is what I need to attain. Whatever is coming up in that space is what I got to deal with. That's one of the realest things. Whatever's coming up in that space is what I have to deal with. So then we go over here to our next little deck. This is your vision board. For me, in the aspects of how I'm at right now, where I'm at, this is my vision board. I use these are my vision board. Whether I'm setting for the day, setting for the week, setting for the month, whatever I'm setting for that day and that point, this is my vision board. So now I go to these cards for myself in the aspect of us learning how to lead ourselves and take ourselves out of that lackluster mentality. The first card I pulled was the Emperor. Second card that I pulled was the Ace of Cups. Next card I pulled was the Magician. We're going to pull 2 more cards. Next card I pulled was the 5 of Cups. And the last card that I pulled was the Chariot. So now that I have my clarity with myself, and I understand that the Emperor is the aspect of the acquired knowledge within that space. Now I have an acquired knowledge within that space. Whatever, when we go into this is when you're being honest with yourself. Yes, exactly. Use everything as a vision board. So now I'm inside of my space with myself, and I'm like, all right, cool, bet. This is the thing when it comes to the knowledge. Knowledge is not supposed to make you feel good. That means you read a book about, that's why you read a book based on bias, then the knowledge that you're taking in is going to be based on that bias. When you're taking in new information, when you're taking in knowledge, it's supposed to help you expand. This is where we come into the aspects of the Emperor being understanding and standing within that, allowing ourselves to be within that knowledge. You see behind his head is like the stairs. And holding ourselves in that knowledge of ourselves and the confidence in us using this knowledge to move forward. I lead myself forward with the knowledge that I have of myself. This is going to take us to the Ace of Cups. The Ace of Cups, when I read the Ace of Cups, I get the energy of that. It's like now I have to address what's filling my cup. It's always based on the new opportunity to feel what is is my cup being filled upon the old imprints, the emotional impulses, the old thought processes of myself, or am I feeling, what is my cup being filled with? Because that's where my attention is going to be at, in that old imprint or whatever's filling my cup. So then when it comes into the Magician card and me now performing my works and performing my magic, remember your intent is powered by what has your attention. So if my knowledge is based on bias, that's what now fills my cup, then that's what controls my magic. That's what controls my magic and my platform and how I move forward. So is my knowledge based on constricting myself, or is my knowledge based, the knowledge that I'm taking in, am I expanding myself? Is my cup filled with things that are going to further restrict me, or is it filled with things that are going to help me expand outside of my comfort zone? Because if I don't expand out of my comfort zone, I can't gain that clarity. I'm still stuck in reaction. Therefore, when I perform my magic or I do what I'm supposed to be doing, I have a precondition in my mind that what should happen. I do my ritual